ठीक है ना, तो हाथ में आदत में आगे actually hurt my okay. So yes sir. So I am briefly telling you about what are the lectins and how they can be used as the antiviral agents. Okay, because we know that we have seen many pandemics that involves the viruses that are very dangerous, and they have caused many diseases like HIV virus and this SARS-CoV-2 virus. Next. Okay. Okay. So this is the introduction about the how the HIV viruses they cause the pandemic at global level. And lectins, there are many antiviral drugs, but these drugs they have certain limitations, and because of that, the other molecules that are proteins, they have been being used as the therapeutic as well as prophylactic molecules for developing the vaccines and other things. So what are lectins? Lectins are the proteins that recognize the glucose and other sugar residues that are present on the glycoproteins of the surfaces of the viruses. In fact, some surfaces of the cancerous cells can also be recognized by these proteins. And these viruses, mostly the RNA containing viruses like HIV and Ebola and SARS-CoV virus, MERS virus, all these contain certain types of tags of these residues, and these residues can act as the markers and that are recognized by specific type of lectins. This is how the lectins prevent the entry of the virus in the host cell. The upper panel of the diagram shows that these are the markers, glycoproteins that are present on the surface of the virus, and these are the cognate receptors. Like this is the HIV virus, and that when it binds to the receptor CD4 and co-receptors of the host cell, then only the viral genome material will be internalized by the cells. Similarly, all the other viruses, they contain these glycoproteins on their surfaces that are recognized by the host receptors. But what the lectin play role is that lectins, they bind the glycoproteins of the viruses. So the viruses cannot bind with the receptors of the host cell. So the entry of the virus in the host is prevented, and that is the principle how lectins they can act as the antiviral agents. Okay. Now classification of the lectins. Actually, lectins they are not very new proteins. Lectins are very old proteins, and they have variety of applications. But currently, this property of lectin is used as antiviral agents. So first we discuss briefly the classification of the lectins. So lectin proteins, they are classified on many bases. Like one basis of classification is the presence of carbohydrate recognizing domain. That is a very important domain because of this CRD domain, this glycoproteins, they are recognized by the lectins. On this basis, there are four types: merolectins, hololectins, chimerolectins, and superlectins. Second basis of classification is based on the evolutionary relationship of the protein motifs that are present in the lectins. On that basis, the lectins they are classified into 7 classes or 7 families: amaranthine, chitin binding lectin, cucurbitaceae, floid lectin, jacqueline related lectins, legume lectins, monocot, mannose binding lectins, type 2 ribosome inactivating lectin. These are the 7 classes based on the types of protein motifs. And third is not the actually classification, but how they recognize, which sugar residue they recognize. On that basis, lectins are whether glucose recognizing, mannose specific, galactose specific, N-acetyl glucosamine specific. This is another basis of classification. All these lectins may agar discuss करें, then mannose binding lectins, or those lectins that specifically recognizes the mannose residue on the glycoproteins of the viruses, that lectins are important, that can be created as domain, what are the CRD domain? Carbohydrate binding domain of the protein that recognizes the carbohydrate moiety. Okay, so what various types of CRD domains, they are present on the lectins. Okay, that means either CRD domain is 1 or 2 or 3 on one protein. So because of that, the single carbohydrate binding domain has single lectin binding single residue of the carbohydrate. And second class is extended carbohydrate binding domain has this lectin protein is having an extra flap, and this is binding to the carbohydrate protein. And third is where hydrophobic patch is there on the lectin protein, and that extra hydrophobic interaction is there. And this is the where one lectin protein is divalent. Okay, that is multifunctional lectin, this one, and multiple CRD in a extracellular region of the lectin. So main property of lectin is that agglutination and small जो interactions हैं that make the larger cumulative interaction and that make the interaction very strong. The classification that was based on the number of carbohydrate residues is like merolectin holo. I am briefly telling that single CRD domain, then mero. If there are two, then hololectins. Chimerolectins and superlectins, they are derivatives of these two. This is the second way of classification. When there is a protein, a particular type of protein arrangement in the subunit, then lectins, they are classified on the 7 classes that I have already told. So this amaranthine family lectins, they have amaranthine family have this type of domain structure. Chitin binding lectin have this. Cucurbitaceae lectin, Jacqueline lectin, legume lectin, mannose binding lectin. I will be talking on this mannose binding lectin because these are the lectins that are specifically, these residues are specifically present on the mannose residues on the virus glycoprotein. That is why these lectins, they are important for interaction. Okay, there is another that is also related to the protein families, presence of beta sandwich fold, presence of beta prism 1 fold and beta prism 2 fold. Okay, these types of folds, they are peculiar features of the 7 families that I have already told. This is the application how lectins, they are used for various types of prophylactic, therapeutic and other biosensor development, etc. On this basis, the above panel is the general function or general applications of lectins like anti-insect, anti-tumor, anti-parasitic, antibacterial, antifungal, all these are general properties. When lectins, they are used for developing any technique like blood phenotyping, mitogen stimulation and lymphocytes and other techniques, vaccine production, then this comes under the advanced applications of lectins. Okay, so now the lectins, this advanced application is being utilized by the scientists so that this glycobiology can be used for detection and in prophylaxis. Now coming to the, because my topic is on the how lectins, they act as the antiviral agents. So understanding the viral glycosylation process is important because we know that all the retroviruses and all the viruses, they contain their features on the surface that help them to attach to the host cell. So like glycosylation is the process that takes place inside the host cell and their glycosylases enzymes are there, and these glycosylases enzymes, they specifically add specific sugar residue, and that specific sugar residue is because of that enzymes. And these glycosylations, they are of 2 types, and I am telling this because students are also there. They should know that there are O-glycosylation and N-glycosylation processes, and the N-glycosylation is mainly on the act as the receptor protein, and O-glycosylations, they are only present in the secretions like mucus and other. So N-glycosylation is the main glycosylation where mannose residues, they are present on the terminal. Okay. This is how the glycoproteins of the various viruses that glycosylated HIV envelope spike protein, and these red ball, small round structures, these are the lectins. And these lectins, they are recognized, not lectins, these are sugar residues like mannose and other, and these are recognized by the actually lectins. Similarly, this is the HIV envelope spike, SARS envelope, Ebola, and other viruses. This is the location of the protein where the glycosylation points are there. HIV protein, which one? GP41 and glycoprotein 120. Similarly, HCV, herpes, hepatitis C virus has E1 and E2. All these are glycosylated. These asterisk marks are the positions of the glycosylations. SARS-CoV virus has also spike protein as well as envelope protein. All contain the glycosylation points, and similarly Japanese encephalitis virus also contains. So most of the viruses, they have this property. Now the HIV specific lectins. We all know that HIV virus GP120 glycoprotein and GP41 glycoprotein, it binds actually the CD4 plus, that is receptor, and the two other co-receptors. If their binding is there, then only virus will be entered into the CD4 plus cells. So, targeting that GP120 and 41 protein, these are the lectins like grifixin, actinovirin, concavalin, cyanovirin, all these lectins, banana lectins, they have been designed how they can be used as the detection molecules. This is the table showing the various types of lectins, like these are the class of lectins that belong to the bacteria, then cyanobacteria, algae lectins, and the angiosperm lectins. This is the different lectins, and these recognizing, see this whole, mainly the mannose residues that are present on the glycoprotein of the virus. And the target protein is GP20 and 41, mainly GP20 and GP41, because we all know that HIV has these two proteins that interact. Similarly, influenza virus also has the lectins, like this is cyanovirin.
Hospital when we start seeing them. So this was a very landmark paper, I would say, because there was no heart failure model, true heart failure model, I would say, available to them. So what we did, and I'm going to show you a couple of slides what we did. And I'm showing you the paper before, because just to show you that when this paper came, this was a heart failure we created in mind. And you can see the number of genes that were basically altered. You can see these 700 genes that were common, when there was a compensatory hypertrophy in the heart, and as well as a decompensated heart. When I say decompensated heart, it means within heart failure. When I say compensated hypertrophy, it means the heart is not failing, it's trying to compensate itself. So these 700 genes were common between compensated and decompensated heart, but there were some 927 genes that were very unique to heart failure phenotype, and about 380 genes that were very unique to compensatory heart. And this is what, at the lower part of the graph you can see these genes. The green is basically compensated, the red is compensated hypertrophy versus heart failure, and the blue is purely, heart failure. And then on the right side, this is very scary, graph you can see, these all these lines, and this is the biochemistry symposium. I wanted to show you that this is what the biochemistry is going on. In heart failure, what is happening in the fatty acid oxidation, you see these chains, branch chains. You see, you've read about Krebs cycle, you've read about this amino acid, metabolism. You see what's going on in heart failure. We didn't know that whether we can pick up the markers from there. So what we did was we did a complete profiling of these, these hearts when they were taken out, and we did the metabolomic study, we did transcriptomic study to understand what genes are getting altered, and of course, the down signaling from the genes, what factors are getting involved. The limitation. What was the limitation of the study? The limitation was that this type of study that was conducted in our mind, and these were female. Why did we choose female? Female was because they don't gain weight over a period of time, number one. And they are easy to manipulate. You can't keep male and female mice together in the cage because there are issues of reproduction. We don't want that. So they are a controlled environment. And then also, it is possible that the molecular profiling results which are shown here And we do not know that when we are creating a heart failure model by that particular method, will those profiles, they will mimic this type of profile or not? We do not know that. So that's the limitation of the study. And of course, when you're doing these studies, in lab, of course it's a controlled environment, it's a near-conditioned environment, the mice are lying nicely, they're being fed nicely, they're not stressed at all, other than the surgery which has been conducted on them. So those are the limitations. Are we seeing whatever we are seeing this paper came in a very high-impact journal, but we do not know whether we can see all of this information in human beings or not. That's a big question. So how do we do this phenotyping? On the left side, this is the ultrasound machine here. You can see this is what we use. It's costing about $1 million. And this is the platform on the lower side where this beam thing, small mouse, you play on that. And these small gadgets which we see on both sides, they're used basically to do the ultrasound, what we call it, the echocardiograph. You can do the echocardiograph in these mice, and you can phenotype them, and I'll be showing you some images of that. And on the right side, you see the guy is lying quietly. He doesn't need any anesthesia. He's lying very quietly. The machine is very compact. And you can do the ultrasound. So see how the environment is different. Here you need an anesthesia. The mouse will not be lying like this as the guy is lying on the right side. He needs to be, secured on the plate, and he's stressed and you're getting him anesthesia. All the effects of those drugs, basically are acting on the heart. And then, suddenly your whole physiology changes. Once you're putting the animal into stress, you're putting drugs and medications to put him to sleep, and which is not happening on the right side, on the left side. So basically, there's a difference there also. So when you're doing these animal models on the left side and you're seeing on the clinic on the right side, some of the drugs and the molecules which you see on your clinic in your lab, they're there, once the drugs they come into the market, how the millions and millions of dollars are spent, and by the time they're on the best side, they don't work. They should pay. So what happens is that, we go back to the square one, what do we do? So this was the model, you can see here, what I was talking about. And I was all studying anatomy. This is the thoracic aorta. And what we do is we create a small constriction here. And once this constriction is created here, it will start creating a pressure, on the left side of the heart. And this is what, causes the heart to pump against resistance. And once that happens, what will happen is it will start, you're lifting weights. When you lift weights, the hand muscles they become very, they have hypertrophy. So this is exactly what you see. This is a mouse which was a sham. It was not subjected to any type of insult. It was just lying quietly in the cage. And on the left side, you can see the insult which we created in the aorta. And you can see how the heart muscle has hypertrophy complete. And the muscle mass has increased. You see it on the right side, you see the graph. The weight of these hearts is from 80 milligrams to 120 milligrams. Whereas in the sham heart, it's about 50 milligrams. This is how, we have created a condition, something to mimic like hypertension, where your arteries are constricted all your life, and your heart is pumping blood. If you do not control your blood pressure properly, what will happen is heart is all the time pumping against resistance. And then it will start getting hypertrophy. And eventually this is what you will see. And once, you start getting these problems, tachycardia, and then you go to the doctor, and doctor see what is going on, and he will check. He say, what? Get an ultrasound done, and when you do the ultrasound, you see the heart is pretty enlarged. Muscles are totally, very muscular. And now you have to regress it. Can you regress it back? Then the question is, can you bring it back to normal state? Even though it is pumping normally. So those are the things, which become very important. And this is 1 week post-surgery. So just in a week's time, you can see we created this situation. Whereas when you have hypertension, it takes tens and decades, maybe 10 or 15 years, you start going into clinic and so. You can see here that protein data here, and you see that the heart pumping effectively aneurysm, which is something like the ejection fraction of the heart. The heart is pumping beautifully still, and there is no problem in the heart, but on the left side you see the heart is not, but it has not failed. So there is a difference between the two. There is hypertrophy, but the heart has not failed, so that compensatory hypertrophy. The heart is compensated very well. Now what happens? This is the pumping. Can you see the moving here? So you see on the left side, this is the heart. which is perfectly squeezing nicely to the left ventricle. You can see the back muscle here, that's the muscle of the heart here. And on the right side, you can see the heart muscle is very thickened. You see the thickness, but still, if you see the endocardium, it's pretty well, contracting very nicely to the tip. There's no problem at all. It's still ejecting out, 70% of the blood, but the ejection fraction is still there. And you have no symptoms, but the symptoms are of this here. The heart muscle has enlarged pretty heavily, and this is at week 4. And this is what the guy was saying, compensatory hypertrophy. What happens when you get a heart attack? So now how do you create a heart attack in the lab? So what you're seeing here in humans, with the cholesterol, but unless you have a gene in your body which can trigger the cholesterol levels to go up, there are very important genes, like there are 4 important genes which are doing a very big project, state project here in Orlando, where we are now doing precision medicine. We are trying to understand the population, who could be having these heart attacks at a young age. But here I'm talking of humans who get a heart attack, maybe age-related, maybe high cholesterol, and this cholesterol starts getting built up in these coronary vessels and it clogs them, and ultimately what happens is there's an infarction. You get a heart attack, and there's an emergency, people die. Sometimes if you don't get an immediate, ambulance, or you don't get immediate help, and how do you create that in the animals? So you see on the right side, this is the thread you can see where we are trying to ligate the coronary artery. You open the chest of the mouth, and you can basically ligate the vessel and create the size of the infarct based on the ligation, placement. So if the LAD artery is coming from the base to the apex, you can create the ligation at the base of that LAD, and that will create, that will dictate the size of the infarct. See, it has taken and you see this part is not moving at all. In the previous figure we were seeing, the tip of the heart was moving here, it's not moving at all. So it's basically akinetic. The segment of the heart is totally akinetic, it's not moving here. And this is how we actually quantify. So if you see here, I'll just put all these videos to show you how we are trying to find. This is all in the animal, it's not in human journey. So this is the type of work that goes in the bedside to understand how you are creating, how you can basically measure this infarct size. So this is the infarct here, and we cut, serial short acts, these to ultrasound, we cut these slices at 1 millimeter, spaces. And you can see these short axis images here on the lower panel, these 9 images. It goes from the base of the heart, and you can see it's moving here very nicely. It's moving nicely here. Little bit segment, stops moving here. And you can see as it goes down, the infarct is more and more prevalent, and the segments are more and more akinetic. You can see this part is moving very left. And here it's not moving at all in the tip of the heart. It's moving up. This is a little less, a little bit more, it's moving a little bit more parallel way, and at the base of the heart it's quite normal. This is how you quantify, and it's very, very, very nicely validated method of quantifying an infarct size to ultrasound, to echocardiography, and if you see the histology, you measure, you stain the heart, you see the infarct size, and you see the echo-based parameter. It's a very beautiful correlation you can see there. Between the histology as well as the echo based, and this is how basically it is done on the the lab side. You can see how post MI the heart is remodeling. There is a normal heart there is a necrosis, and it then thins out. There is a dilatation, there is hypertrophy also, there is LV dilatation. This is how the heart is remodeling. You can see on the left side it is at day 1, and at week 2. The heart is pretty much, the cavity is enlarged, muscles are a little bit hypertrophy, and the infarct has spread a little bit more on the apex of the heart. Again, to my command, this is that.
So do you think people who are on only starting they are less susceptible for the bone infection? Because elective you are showing that increase the ACE vaccine.
But it is also exposing the epitopes of the.
That's okay. What I am saying that people who are only starting, taking only starting, they develop the reaction similar to the
Okay.
so they have less chance of
Developing COVID.
yeah.
That